Hi guys, I am going to finish chapter 6 today and then I'm going to start on chapter 7 and see how far we get. If you remember yesterday in chapter 6, they were talking about all of their celebrations. They just had 2 weddings, they had spring, and now they were getting ready for their 4th of July celebration. And the kids were saying that they were super excited, but they were going to miss the sound of the cannons in Berlin. 16 times they fired it last year, one for each state in the Union, Hannah remembered. This year it will be 17. The new one for our new state, Ohio. I wish we were going to be back home to hear the cannon. That night, as Hannah and Jed were going up the ladder to the loft, Hannah looked at Papa and asked, "Please wake us up early so we won't miss any of the fun." Papa smiled knowingly. "You won't have to worry about that, young lady. Just you wait and see." "Wonder what he meant by that," Jed whispered. "Huh. He probably means he'll hit the floor of the loft with a broomstick 17 times. They laughed as they stretched out and fell asleep. The next morning, Hannah and Jed were awakened from a deep sleep by a thunderous boom. They sat right up. What was that? There it was again. Crack! Boom! Hannah started down the ladder to find Papa and Mama. Crack! Boom! As she reached the bottom of the ladder, Papa was waiting. "How do you like our Independence Day, Ohio style?" he greeted her. Crack! Boom! "What are they doing out there, Papa?" asked Hannah as she ran towards the door. Then he explained. "While we were cutting down the trees around the clearing, we picked out the 17 biggest ones and cut them nearly, and I have sad news, we are missing a page. So you're going to have to use your imagination on what they were doing and what they cut down the trees for, because this is a paper book and one of the pages has fallen out and I could not find it. So we're just going to go on to the next page. They wanted larger houses that would be more like those that had been living in back east. They were made of finer wood, and they had a second floor with larger rooms. Papa was hoping to clear his farm lot before next spring. For several days, Hannah and Jed went with him into the woods to search out certain trees as he cleared the land. As he explained to them, those two saplings will make fine sled runners. And the small tree that has grown around the rock until it is bent, that will be a perfect handle for the blade I brought along. We'll burn out the center of some of those bigger logs for pig troughs, and save those forked saplings for pig yokes we'll be needing in the spring." The children helped Papa begin to clear the trees. As he pulled out the young trees by the roots, next he used his axe to cut down the smaller trees. Then he piled up all the trees he had cut down in an open space and burned them. The larger trees were girdled by chopping a ring around them through the bark and then the sap layer. That will gradually kill them over the next few years and they will be easier to fall. In the meantime, I'll work around them. All right, we are going to start chapter 7. Meat for the table. Jed, now almost 12 years old, and if we remember when they started this journey, Jed and Hannah were 8 years old. So Jed is now almost 12 years old, was learning the way of the frontier. In the spring, he and Papa went to barter with Mr. Wallens for a small number of pigs. It was agreed that Jed would come back and spend the summer with Mr. Wallens helping with the chores to pay for the pigs. After Papa and Mr. Wallens lifted the muddy, squealing young pigs into the wagon, Papa tested the sideboards to be sure they were strong enough. He climbed onto the seat beside Jed and called, "Giddy up." The spring rains had come and the horses' hooves made a whoosh, whoosh sound as they lifted out of the mud. Papa was a sight, covered with mud after loading the pigs. On the way to town, we'll stop and pick up Abner. This is the way we'll do the job when we get home and start to unload. I'll hold the pig as still as I can. Then you'll put the forked stick over the back of the pig's neck and hold it there. Abner will take the straight stick and tie the end of it as tightly as he can to the ends of the forked stick, which are under the pig's chin. This makes a pretty good handle. Remember how hard it was to take hold of one of those critters? Papa laughed. Papa made the job sound easier than it really was. It took all afternoon to yoke those 20 pigs and take them out into the woods to be set free. There they would find their own food all during the summer, or forage as it was called. Then, in the fall, Papa would go into the woods and round them up. Mama gasped as she saw the 3 come in from the woods. My land, I've never seen 3 dirtier people. Early in the spring of 1806, a frontier regiment was formed in Worthington. Mr. Kilbourne became Captain Kilbourne and drilled the recruits on summer evenings on the village green. Their families gathered around to watch the Milta go through their drills and attended the muster day ceremony in September when they were commissioned. It was now fall and the school would soon be starting. We need to have one good turkey hunt now that the harvest is in. And before you start studying again, son, Papa said one night, let's set out to the turkey pens tomorrow and see whether Abner can spare the time to come along with us. The next day, Jed checked the turkey pens. These pens were little more than a slab of wood with pegs stuck into it on all 4 sides. Papa put the pens in the back of the wagon alongside his long-handled shovel. And that was actually chapter 7. So we are going to go ahead and do chapter 8 too. So as we can see, time has passed. They are building a farm. They have pigs. They are going to try and get a turkey. The kids are getting older. They have somewhat of a military that Mr. Kilbourne is now Captain Kilbourne and in charge of, and they're doing drills. And their little 12-house community is now growing into a larger community. Chapter 8 is called Worthington Keeps Growing. Crack! Got him, Jed called out. The boy carried a heavy 5-foot rifle as he ran through the trees toward the gray squirrel that he had just shot. He picked up the squirrel and ran out of the woods towards Matthew Talbot, who was cultivating the field of corn. It was the summer of 1809. Jed was 14 years old now and as tall as his father. So, even more time has passed. Remember, when we started at the beginning of the story, Jed and Hannah were only 8 years old, so now they're 14 years old. Look, Pa, this squirrel number 36 this summer. If I keep on, I'll have more than preserved Leonard shot last summer. Jed sounded pleased with himself. How many did he shoot? Matthew tried to remember. 43 it was. He figured as long as we were required to shoot these pests, he'd try his best. The 1,200 we shot in the village last year seemed like a lot, but the little pests are still getting into our grain storage. Back in Berlin, it was the rats, but here in Worthington, it's squirrels and mice, Matthew complained. So they were killing the squirrels because they were getting into their grains. So that's why they were trying to kill as many as they could. We'd best be getting back to the house. If all went well, Sarah and her new beau should be arriving from Chillicothe. Sarah was now a school teacher in Chillicothe, and a visit from her was always a treat. The family was also fond of her young friend, Will. A beau would be like her boyfriend or somebody that she's dating. Home for the Talbots was no longer the log cabin to which they had come for 6 years before. At Lovisa's insistence, Matthew had built a neat frame house, much like the one they had left in Berlin. The log cabin was now an outbuilding used for tool storage and farm things. The years in which Hannah and Jed had been growing up had been growing up for years for Worthington too. The Indians who had come into the village to trade furs had gradually drifted away. Later, when I may be missing another page. It appears I am missing a couple pages. 36, I am missing page 37 too. And like I said, I couldn't find any extra pages. So we are just going to continue on. I'm very sorry, friends. I don't know where these pages have been. Like I said, every year in 3rd grade, they do this, so the pages might have just got misplaced. So I'm just going to continue on. Hannah ran across the village green to the Penny house, where Polly and Abner had arrived on their visit from their home in Delaware. They would be so glad to see Sarah and Will. Hannah wanted to invite them to supper. Sarah seemed to enjoy helping Hannah and Mama as they prepared supper, all the time catching up on the news of the marriages and new babies in the village. In the other room, Matthew, Abner, and Jed were eager to tell Will about the town they had helped to build. Worthington now had a grist mill. We've been able to have our own wheat and corn ground right here in town for 4 years now. Tomorrow we'll take you to see the mill down on the Whetstone just south of town, where Rush Creek flows into it. Captain Kilbourne built a mill race, a wooden trough, about a quarter of a mile up the creek. The water runs across the huge wheel and turns the grindstones, Matthew told him. There's always a good flow of water down the Rush Creek. You must have a good business started with the mill, Will commented. I'm surprised at the number of houses you've built here. Yes, Matthew said proudly. Captain Kilbourne built a brick house on his lot the year after we came. He needed room for his large family. Did you know that his first wife, Lucy, died in 1807? They had 6 children, and then he remarried Cynthia Goodale Barnes, a widow with 3 children of her own. Don't forget, Pa, chimed in Jed. He also keeps a tavern for travelers on the main floor of the big brick house. Sometimes they ask me to take their horses around to the stable. Matthew was determined to tell the young man from Chillicothe as much as he could about Worthington, hoping that he would be moving closer if he and Sarah got married. Ezra Griswold sold his double cabin to Nathan Stewart and moved across the green. He opened an inn there too. Some say he plans to build the biggest brick inn in town there on the north side of the green. Then Nathan Stewart put a general store in Griswold's old cabin. It's the first store we've had here. There are new settlements springing up all around us now. Before he died, Levi Buttles negotiated the sale of land east of here for a group from Granville, Massachusetts. Several of them have kinfolk here, and they named their settlement after their home back east. Matthew couldn't be stopped. We've got so many newcomers lately, and they don't even all come to St. John's Church. There's been a circuit riding preacher coming through here, a Methodist, I believe. They've been meeting in different homes or in barns, sometimes in the woods in the summer. It was now time for Abner to join the conversation. We would like the state legislature to make Worthington the state capital. How would the folks of Chillicothe like to know the people here in Worthington have pledged $2,500 to build the state building if only they decide that the votes will allow us to be the capital? But right then, Ma, Sarah, and Hannah called to them. You'll have to eat now or we'll never be ready to go to the midsummer dance in the academy building. So, a couple things happen in chapter 8. Worthington is growing. They have an inn. They have bigger houses. They have lots of houses. They have a store. They have a mill where they can grind their own grains. They also want to be the capital of Ohio. Now, we all know kind of the answer to that if it happened, because we know Worthington is not the capital of Ohio, but they started a fund, a pledge of $2,500 to try and convince the government to make Worthington the capital. In the first video, we talked a little bit about money. I bet today, if we want to make a change, we need a lot more than $2,500. But back then, that was a huge pledge. I will continue on with chapter 9, which I believe is our last chapter tomorrow. Bye, guys.